Today on Gunbelievable, we're taking a look at the Vektor CP-1, designed by Littleton Engineering Works. You've seen this gun before in The Hunger Games, Firefly, Battlestar Galactica, and lots of other media, especially sci-fi. But since they only made about 13,000, less than half of those were exported from South Africa, and many of those were bought back as part of a safety recall, you've probably never held one. Fortunately for me, viewer Clockwork Dimetrodon 1001 lent me his to review. What a gunbelievably cool guy. So does it shoot as good as it looks? Let's find out. The Vektor comes in your standard lunchbox-style container. There's no safety lock. It was imported before that became legally mandatory, but it does come with the manual, a QA certificate, some cleaning tools, a brochure for the company's other products, check out the scopes on these bad boys, and a warranty card, which isn't valid unless signed and returned within 15 days of purchase. Oops. The manual contains all the usual stuff and a nice parts diagram at the back, but there are a few lines that catch my eye. One, it says pistols don't cause accidents, but this was produced before the P320. It tells you not to shoot if you're cold. That actually kind of makes sense. It also describes the CP-1 as a contingency handgun that has obviously not been designed for continuous firing. And it specifies the expected lifespan of the pistol as only 6,000 rounds, though it could probably go as high as 10K with regular care and maintenance. That's not very much. The CP-1's about as big as a Glock 19 in height and length, though a touch slimmer at just over an inch thick. It weighs 30 ounces or 850 grams when fully loaded to its 10+1 capacity. That's about the same as the 19, but with 5 fewer rounds on board. These mags are designed to hold 13 and 12, not great, not terrible, but this gun was imported during a US ban on standard capacity magazines, so these are both artificially limited to 10. When Littleton designed this gun, they outsourced the aesthetics to an industrial design firm, and boy does it show. This thing looks sleek. There are curves everywhere, hardly a straight line in sight. The embedded Vektor logo on both sides is a tasteful and elegant pop of blue and gold. The splash of red on the trigger stands out. The mag release and safety both blend in seamlessly. The slight forward cant of the muzzle adds a little panache, and I love the two-tone look of the stainless slide on this example, though they were also available in matching black. Picking it up, I'm sad to say it does not feel as good as it looks. The curves and smooth surfaces make it comfy and snag-free for concealed carry, but it's slipperier than I want a gun to be, and the palm swell is not ergonomic. It's just a little too low, and it becomes uncomfortable with a tight grip. It feels smaller in the hand than other guns of its size, but it's not so small that I can't get my large hands fully on it. My pinky fits just fine on the gun, even with the smaller magazine installed, so while you might think that the longer one gives you extra leverage, you'd have to have gargantuan hands to take advantage. Manipulating the slide is really difficult. Although it travels fairly smoothly, the spring is stiff, and its surface is even slicker than the rest of the gun. These tiny serrations hardly help at all. If you're keeping this thing slightly oiled to prevent corrosion, it's like grabbing a greased pig. There is no slide stop lever, so the slide only locks back on an empty magazine. There's hardly any travel left in the slide when it's locked open, so when you reload, you don't get much tactile feedback, and it's even worse if you're somewhere where you can't hear it click. Even though the mag release is flush, I find it easy enough to use. It's well placed, you don't have to press it very far, and it's not too stiff. The thumb rest up here and the extended ridge from the trigger guard guide my thumb right to it from both sides. Mags drop free fine, though your firing hand can get in the way of the smaller mag's baseplate. The mags are notched on both sides, and it'd have been easy to make a reversible release, but they never did. The sights are basic irons, black in the rear with a large white dot up front. They're taller and thinner than most irons, which I like. The front is dovetailed and adjustable for windage, but the rear is part of this polymer cap on the back of the slide, making it non-adjustable and making aftermarket support unlikely from the jump. Since there's no easy adjustment for elevation, the manual says you'll have to remove material from the front or the rears if the gun shoots low or high. No options for optics mounting, but that makes sense given this gun was introduced in 1996, and there's also no accessory rail, so you'll be running this gun stock. The trigger's drop safety, aka the trigger dingus, is an unusual design. Pressing it causes this pin on the side to retract, clearing the way for it to travel rearward. The whole trigger face is serrated. I don't notice it much in dry fire. We'll see if that changes on the range. The pull is heavy at over 7 pounds. There's a decent amount of squishy take-up, followed by a crisp break, and then some mushy over-travel. The reset is long, audible but not tactile, and it doesn't take you right back to the wall. There's a touch more take-up to get through. Not horrible, you could get used to it, but definitely not good, and quite disappointing for a gun that's hammer-fired and single-action. Glock makes a better trigger. There's a manual safety in front of the trigger guard. Push it back for safe, and push it forward for fire. You have to reach your finger into the trigger guard to deactivate it. That's better than reaching in to activate it, but still doesn't jibe with modern gun safety culture. I also don't find it fast or easy to use, just awkward. Littleton designed it so that as you put the gun into a matching holster, the safety could be automatically engaged by the holster itself. There are pros and cons to that idea. I'm not so sure it's necessary. The safety does double duty as a disassembly button. After removing the magazine and clearing the gun, hold the safety to the rear while pulling the slide back further than you normally would, then lift it up and let it forward. Inside, the gun has the usual hallmarks of gas-delayed blowback, with a fixed barrel that guides the recoil spring and a gas piston below. This spring tab at the back of the slide is meant to be a drop safety, preventing the firing pin from going forward unless it's pressed out of the way by the falling hammer. But after these guns arrived in the US, it was discovered that an impact to the back of the gun could set it off anyway. Playing with it a bit here, that's not surprising. This spring is very weak. It feels like something that belongs in a ballpoint pen rather than a firearm. Vektor issued a recall, and while they did convert some of the guns to a plunger-based safety like you see in Glocks, making the subpar trigger even worse, they also offered a lucrative cash buyback option that lots of folks took. That's made these guns very rare. After being disappointed by both the Walther CCP and the Rogax, I didn't expect a gas-delayed gun like the Vektor to shoot all that well. But it surprised me. It's pleasant to shoot, and the recoil is a touch softer than average. The serrations on the trigger did eventually irritate my finger, though it took half a dozen mags to get to that point, and by then, the gun was hot enough to warrant putting down for a bit anyway. That's one downside of gas-delayed blowback the CP-1 doesn't avoid. It heats up a touch slower than a Walther CCP, but there's still a pretty low cap on how much you can shoot this thing in one afternoon. The accuracy is fine. I think the gun is mechanically solid, but the heavy, mediocre trigger adds a little challenge, and the sights are nothing special. Most importantly, the gun shoots several inches low at just 5 to 7 yards. As annoying as it'd be to do what the manual suggests and file down the front sight, I'd probably do it, if it were my gun rather than borrowed. Reliability, though, is the Achilles heel. The Vektor is famous for feeding hollow points poorly. To try to fix it, they changed the design slightly during the production run, switching from controlled feed to push feed, and even though this is one of the push feed models, defensive loads caused at least one malfunction per magazine. Reliability with ball ammo was better. I got through about 50 rounds with no problems, but as the gun got just the tiniest bit dirty, I could feel the slide getting sluggish, and I started having regular malfunctions, with both failures to eject and failures to go into battery. The manual suggests cleaning this thing every 100 rounds, but if you're using cheap, low-power ammo, I think you should clean even more often than that, unless you're ready to practice clearing malfunctions. If you clean it aggressively and you experiment to find a brand of ball ammo that it likes, I suspect this Vektor could be acceptably reliable, but Glock, it ain't. So who is this gun for? Well, the CP-1 was first intended for a South African police contract in the mid-90s, but when it failed to win that and Littleton pivoted to the export market, it was very nearly a sensible choice for concealed carry against the competitors of its day. It's slim, shoots well, and looks great. But a carry gun that's high maintenance, has mediocre reliability, and won't feed hollow points is pretty gunderwhelming, and the drop safety recall was the final nail in the coffin. So now, it's just for Hollywood. No other handgun strikes quite as fine a balance between looking familiar and futuristic on screen. That's it from Gunbelievable on the Vektor CP-1. Smash that like button, be sure to subscribe. If I get 1 million subs, I'll borrow a Neopup.